Every year we get closer to Halloween season, we see a major push for indie horror games, which clearly makes a lot of sense when you think about it. However, after the initial announcement of these games, unfortunately we don't really get to see too many of them again until closer to their release dates. A big reason for this is due to the lack of budget for marketing, as these games are developed by a much smaller team, and in some cases they are developed by maybe 1 or 2 developers. But the truth of the matter is that these games are just as incredible looking as some AAA horror games out there, and honestly, they deserve a lot more love than they unfortunately get. So with that in mind, I'm shining a bright light on 10 amazing looking indie horror games that I'm personally most excited about. All of these games are scheduled to release in either 2024 or 2025 at the latest. Oh, and before we get started with today's video, be sure to hit that subscribe button if you want to see more rankings on horror games. Also, I'll have the link to the Steam page of each game on this list, with the exception of one game that doesn't have one yet. So if any of these games interest you at all, be sure to wishlist them on Steam, as that'll go a long way for an indie game such as these on this list. Anyway, my name is Ruben with Nursepace Games, and these are 10 upcoming indie horror games that I'm most excited about. Number 10, Ground Zero. Fans of Dino Crisis have been dying for a remake of Capcom's dinosaur survival horror game, but unfortunately it seems like it'll be a while before we eventually get one. In the meantime, however, there are 2 indie horror games with different approaches that might scratch that Dino Crisis itch. One of those 2 options is Ground Zero, a Korean developed survival horror game that's heavily inspired by classic survival horror games like Dino Crisis and even Resident Evil. After a meteor crash lands in South Korea, the player must navigate the country in order to unravel the mystery of these infected creatures. The enemy types of the game include zombie-like creatures with parasites coming out of them, and even giant monsters that give off the same vibe as the dinosaurs seen in Dino Crisis. Speaking of which, Ground Zero even features a similar currency system as Dino Crisis 2, in which you can collect points from defeating creatures and then exchange them for valuable resources. Overall, fans that are waiting for a Dino Crisis remake can take a chance on this indie horror game that appears to have a lot of similar traits as the first 2 entries of that series. Currently, like most games on this list, Ground Zero does not have a release date, but looks like it's projected to release sometime in 2025. Number 9, Deathground. Ground Zero isn't the only indie horror game currently in development that might make Dino Crisis fans extremely happy. Deathground is another option for survival horror fans waiting for the Dino Crisis remake, as it is a dinosaur horror game at its core. However, Deathground takes a different approach with its gameplay and instead focuses on a first-person survival horror co-op game in which 4 players can team up to escape the dinosaur threat together. The gameplay appears to be less combat heavy and more stealth based, while also sharing qualities with one of the scariest sci-fi horror games I've ever played, Alien Isolation. Actually, I think it's fair to describe this game as a Dino Crisis meets Alien Isolation. You still have resources to hold off the dinosaurs and distract them, but like Alien Isolation, it looks like you'll be relying a lot more on stealth. Hell, you even have a motion detector that kind of reminds me of the one that Amanda Ripley uses in Alien Isolation. I truly believe that there's an open market in the gaming industry for a dinosaur horror game, and Deathground might finally make us scared of dinosaurs once again. Unfortunately, we don't have a release date for this game, and it's been a while since we last saw a trailer on it, but last we heard it was still scheduled to release sometime in 2024. Number 8, No More Room in Hell 2. One of my favorite video game memories was playing Left 4 Dead with my friends. I was obsessed with those games. And while the Versus mode made Left 4 Dead the best asymmetrical horror game of all time, I remember having a blast with my friends while playing through all of the campaigns on Expert. The 4-player co-op campaigns on the hardest difficulty of the game force the players to communicate with each other, strategically maneuver their way through difficult situations, and work as a team in order to successfully beat the campaign. No More Room in Hell 2 looks to capture the essence of what that was, with its 8-person co-op gameplay that challenges the players to work together in order to defeat a city full of zombies. This game also challenges the players to be more cautious in their decisions thanks to the inclusion of permadeath, which I know is going to create some really tense moments with your team when they have to decide if they need to leave you behind or risk their lives to save you. Not gonna lie, I might be leaving your ass behind if I have a really cool character. I can't wait to see how this game plays out, and I'm hyped to be jumping into this game the moment it releases. Currently, No More Room in Hell 2 looks to release just in time for the Halloween season on Steam. Number 7, by Sweet Carole. One of my favorite hidden gems is Remothered Tormented Fathers. The storytelling, the stalker enemies, the amount of jump scares, and the tense atmosphere created in this game from start to finish is exactly why I'm so high on the head developer of that game, Chris Darrow. Well, the guy's back, and this time he's bringing us a unique take on our favorite fairy tale movies. By Sweet Carole is a horror platformer that takes inspiration from some of the most iconic animated films of all time, but with a dark twist. At first glance, this game might appear to be a kid's game as the animation style makes you think of a Disney princess game or something along those lines. However, after diving deeper into the trailer, we learned that this game looks absolutely terrifying. We haven't seen much on By Sweet Carole outside of the first reveal gameplay earlier this year, but from what we have seen of it and from what we know about the lead developer of the game, I'm all in on By Sweet Carole. This game truly has the potential to be one of the most unique horror games of all time, and I definitely want to get my hands on it as soon as it releases on modern consoles, all modern consoles, in 2025. Yep, that includes Nintendo Switch. For any of you Switch users out there, you are now going to have a really interesting horror game to play on your Switch, so enjoy. Number 6, Perish Truth. Sadly, I'm not exactly sure how likely we'll get this game in the next year or so due to Perish Truth only having one main programmer and a lack of funding. Actually, I wouldn't be that shocked if this game unfortunately has difficulty finding any sort of funding and ultimately gets cancelled. But I'm going to have a lot of hope and pray that this game releases at some point because it looks fucking awesome. It literally combines two of my favorite franchises of all time, Zero Escape series and Resident Evil. Perish Truth follows 10 strangers trapped inside of a facility on an island. In a Saw 2-like setup, the strangers must make decisions on who they can trust and who they can't trust, solve puzzles, avoid traps, and most importantly, battle zombies along the way. It looks like a really fun game, and if you talked to me about this game about a year ago, then I would have told you that it's my most anticipated indie horror game right now. But with the lack of updates on this game, Perish Truth has fallen a bit in terms of my levels of excitement. Still, when it does eventually get a release date and an updated trailer, then you know your boy will be all about this again. Perish Truth looks to release on PC at some point, and it does have 2 playable demos that are available over on itch.io. Unfortunately, there's no link to a Steam page right now, and there are no demos available on Steam. Number 5, Hollowbody. As we enter the top 5 of this list, we'll start hitting some games that are extremely close together for me in terms of my excitement level. And out of every game on this list, Hollowbody is the closest in terms of its release date. I will literally be playing this game in about 2 weeks from now, and I couldn't be more excited about it. Hollowbody takes a cyberpunk-like world and adds the atmosphere and gameplay of classic Silent Hill. Honestly, if you're like me and you're really hyped about Silent Hill 2 Remake, then Hollowbody might actually be a great pickup for you to hold you over until Silent Hill 2 releases. The story looks really intriguing, and the gameplay gives me a lot of nostalgia from my time as a kid playing through classic survival horror games. The monster designs looks interesting as well, and it seems like the puzzles will be fun too. Though I will say I wish we saw a little more of that in the recent trailers. Now, there was a demo available for Hollowbody not so long ago, but it seems like it might have been taken down, so we might have to hold off on another demo being playable before the game releases, but we won't have to wait too long for that because Hollowbody releases on September 12th on PC. Number 4, Reanimal. At an event like Gamescom that doesn't normally have many surprises, Reanimal was probably one of the more exciting announcements of Gamescom 2024. As someone who's only recently dived into the Little Nightmares franchise, to see the original dev team work on another game has me pretty hyped. Reanimal looks to be taking a lot of inspiration from Little Nightmares with the gameplay and the artistic style, but it also seems to be getting a little more creative with the enemy types. More specifically, as the name suggests, Reanimal seems to be playing with more animal-like qualities and the nightmares that haunt the player throughout the game. Overall, it's something that completely shocked me, especially when Little Nightmares 3 is still in development and planned for 2025 as well. Either way, I'm hyped for both games, and surprisingly, I'm actually more excited about Reanimal than I am about Little Nightmares 3. Is that wrong? Number 3, Tormented Souls 2. Tormented Souls is still currently my favorite indie survival horror game of all time. Obviously, that comes from my appreciation of classic survival horror games, but I honestly can't get enough of Tormented Souls, and since its release in 2021, I've played it every single year. It's a fucking masterpiece, and honestly guys, I need to play it on stream for you guys sometime soon. Anyway, since Tormented Souls 2 is clearly a sequel, let's actually focus on that original game, as it's because of that game why I'm so hyped about the second entry of the franchise, Tormented Souls 2. The original game had everything you could possibly want from a classic survival horror game with modern graphics. Fixed camera angles, interesting monster designs, an eerie hospital mansion with a killer soundtrack, unique gameplay mechanics such as a time travel feature that needs to be used in certain puzzles, a surprisingly exciting story mystery to explore, and without a doubt the most challenging puzzles that you'll ever come across in a survival horror game. I love this game, and if Tormented Souls 2 implements all of these key traits in that game as well, then it's going to be a massive W for me. which, spoiler, the 24 minutes of gameplay that we got from IGN shows us that puzzles, atmospheric horror, and fixed camera angles remain a major part in the sequel. Oh, and did I mention that this time the game's going to be developed on Unreal Engine 5 instead of the Unity engine? Yeah, there's a lot to be excited for Tormented Souls 2, hence why it claims the number 3 spot on this list. Number 2, Echoes of the Living. Honestly, it actually kills me to not put Echoes of the Living in the number 1 spot. I'm extremely hyped for this game. If you're a fan of Resident Evil, which you probably are if you are subscribed to my channel, but Echoes is literally a modern version of classic Resident Evil 2 and 3. And I say classic because the gameplay is inspired by old school survival horror games complete with tank controls and fixed camera angles. However, what really makes it so unique compared to a lot of the other classic survival horror games out there is that it's complete with modern graphics. So imagine if Resident Evil 2 Remake was fixed camera angles instead of the modern over-the-shoulder perspective. Actually, you don't even have to imagine it thanks to the mod that's available for Resident Evil 2 Remake, which basically gives you an idea of what RE2 Remake would have been if they stuck with the fixed camera angle perspectives. And honestly, it's still phenomenal. I'm not shading modern controls at all, and RE2 Remake is easily in my top 5 Resident Evil games of all time. With that being said, the fixed camera mod was a lot of fun, and that's exactly what we are getting with Echoes of the Living. The great thing about an urban setting like a city is that it opens the door for a million possibilities in terms of the buildings and areas that can be explored by the player. We haven't seen much of the story, but honestly, a game like this, I'm not really excited about the story of the game. I'm excited because of the gameplay and the nostalgic feeling that we're gonna get when experiencing this game for the first time. Which, by the way, I have played the demo and this game hits hard as you would expect from a classic survival horror game. And the only reason why it didn't claim the number 1 spot comes from the lack of marketing on it. Due to them being a very small development team, we haven't seen much on it in a while. So my hype has fallen a little bit on this game, while the next entry has done the opposite and moved into the number 1 spot. Still, Echoes of the Living looks incredible and it's a must play for fans of the original Resident Evil trilogy. Before we get to the number 1 entry, if you haven't already, please consider hitting that subscribe button. You won't believe this, but literally only 19% of my viewers are subscribed to the channel. This is extremely shocking, so if you can, hit that subscribe button, and if you're not sure about it, then maybe tell me in the comments about ways I can earn your sub going forward. Because it doesn't really cost you anything to be a subscriber, and it really helps a small business owner like myself who is doing this full time. My goal is to get to 50%, so let's make it happen, nerds. Anyway, back to the list. Number 1, Post Trauma. As we get closer and closer to the release of Post Trauma, my excitement for this game continues to grow. If you've seen any other videos on my channel talking about my most anticipated horror games, then you might realize that my position of this game has continued to rise over the last year. That's because every time I've seen this game, my hype level goes up. From seeing its initial announcement in 2022 at the Game Awards, to playing the demo late last year, to finally seeing the release date and a story trailer of Post Trauma at Gamescom 2024, this game has literally crept up on my list of most exciting indie horror games until now it finally has claimed the number 1 spot. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at the game itself. Post Trauma is heavily inspired by classic survival horror games like the traditional Silent Hill games. The monster designs look terrifying to the point where they rival some of the creature designs of the Silent Hill franchise. The puzzles are extremely challenging yet satisfying, which is a major quality that I love in survival horror games. The story of Roman, the train conductor, has intrigued me, and the story trailer at Gamescom definitely helped me get more hyped about that as well. Overall, this game screams fan service for those that grew up playing classic survival horror games. And with all of that in mind, and with the game releasing just in time for Halloween on October 29th, Post Trauma is the indie survival horror game that I am most excited about. But that does it for this episode of Nerd Space Games. Hit up the comments and let me know what you think of my list. Is Post Trauma the indie horror game that you are most excited about, or is there a different game that claims your number 1 spot? Let me know down below. Also, don't forget to shout out any upcoming indie horror games that I didn't mention in today's video in the comments below. Games like Psychosis, Pine Harbor, Heartworm, and another brand new indie horror game announced at Gamescom 2024, Aila. All of these games look fantastic as well, but ultimately I had to narrow my list to only 10. So be sure to shout out your favorite upcoming indie horror games of 2024-2025. Anyway, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to my channel for more survival horror content. Also, leave a like on today's video if you enjoyed today's topic. But thanks for watching, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next episode of Nerd Space Games. Take care.